Morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, Brian. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. I missed you guys over the weekend. Wasn't to go on Saturday, I mean. Bomatan. Good morning, Bitcoiners. B for victory. P-Man Van in the house. Good morning. We are indeed at the 800,000th block of Bitcoin. I noticed that. Amazing. And we got a sun up. We got all kinds of blocks getting found, right? We're good. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee, talk about what's new. Delicious. All right. Let's hear. Good morning. Good morning. Where do I sats? Hope you're doing well. Daniel, indeed, good morning. Hey, I had a really neat thought, I guess maybe yesterday, the day before. I heard it somewhere, which is that the way we do this in the morning, right, with a bit of interaction and talking and the chat and back and forth, you know how sort of revolutionary that is? Do you know that all media in this previous era is the only time where the word interactive was even needed? Like the idea of interactive media, right? Like the only in the past generation was media passive. It's an anomaly that you have to call media interactive because you used to read things, you used to touch and have some sort of tactile interaction. Only with television and music and radio and all this stuff, when it was beamed into you and you just passively had to listen or all that stuff, was media not interactive. Interactive, the very concept of interactive, wouldn't exist unless we'd have gone through that era. So here's to the interactive nature of how we do the news here. So very fun. Good morning from Massachusetts. Indeed, we love Massachusetts. I normally go there most summers. I doubt I'll make it there this year. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. No plans to go to Maine yet. We love Vermont too much. All right. Good morning. Great day. Indeed, everyone. All right. So let's get started with some super Moscow time. This isn't just a normal Moscow time, everyone. This is the greatest Moscow time we've ever done. Because we weren't around for a couple of days, it just piles up, the Moscow time. And because things are so Moscow-y these days, we just get so much good stuff. So where do we start, right? We got an oldie but a goodie. I just wanted to bring it back here to get us started because we're just going to ease into some Moscow time here. This is from our friend Nick Carter, who is selling his own orbs, by the way. So we'll talk about WorldCoin later. But here's an article from NPR that he shared that was published a couple years ago. And y'all got to hear it because it's awesome. It relates to all of us here, all right? The right-wing conspiracy theory about eating bugs is as racist as you think. So, all right, let me try and unpack it. Let me just get it straight. I don't want to lead anyone astray. So it sounds like it's not racist to eat bugs. Did I get it right? It's not racist to eat bugs. Okay, I think I got it right. So just in case you're wondering. Now, along the same lines of conspiracy theories, right? This one's now it's very difficult to understand why it reads this way, the title, but I'm just going to read you the title the way it is. Excess deaths, because we're having this huge spike in excess deaths now in 2023. Really up in 2020 because of COVID, right? COVID was a real virus. Let's remember that. But things got sort of taken care of in 2021, 2022. We were at the normal level. But this year, 2023, excess deaths through the roof. And here's an article that says, excess deaths spark dangerous theories. So I guess this has to do with people asking about the excess deaths. So I guess that's a no-no, maybe. NBC, it's really hard to compete with NBC's capacity at Moscow time because they're in another level. They're just in another level, right? So this is written this weekend, and it was from that balcony where I think Hunter Biden took a bump of coke. I think that's what I saw. And so the pictures are from that day. It's from July 4th when they're on the Truman patio. And Hunter's there. I'm not sure if it's before or after the bump of coke. He looks a little bit sober here. But here's NBC News' actual headline from today. Republicans up the personal tax on Biden and his family. President Biden's family story has long been one of his greatest strengths politically. Didn't you know that? It was one of his greatest strengths politically. Republicans are starting to think they can turn it into a liability. I'm not even going to explain why they are talking about turning into a liability, but it's news to the NBC audience that Hunter's family, not so good. Joe Biden's family, not so good, right? Long his strength. So good. All right, we told you the other day about how they're going to test a little bit of blackouts in California, right? Just get a little bit of blackouts, right? Just get some rolling blackouts. We're going to manage global warming and climate change with a little bit of rolling blackouts. Some people said, I don't know if that works. We'll see, right? Ooh. Well, good thing. South Africa is actually trying out the whole theory, and Bloomberg has thumbs up. They're saying, way to go. Here's the headline. South Africa beats climate change, beats climate goal as blackouts slash emissions, right? South Africa. So because their grid is broken, but it's proving the point. At least it did take down the global greenhouse gas emissions, right? So South Africa emissions are falling ahead of a 2025 target. Power plant breakdowns are reducing industrial activity. Yes, yes. And then they show like a bunch of nuclear power plants. I don't know. Does South Africa have nuclear? I don't know. I'm not sure. So this one, I'm just going to let it hang. You got to listen to the headline. All right. You got to listen to every word because there's pure Moscow time. There's no punchline coming here, guys. You've got to figure this one out. Ready? Man allegedly shot and killed his pregnant boyfriend and then himself in a murder-suicide. There you go. Next, we got Lowe's worker gets fired after being punched 3 times trying to stop thieves. So she's done, right? She's 68 years old, had no business working there. Here's a good one from Canada. You got to move fast. Quotes, science learns to quickly link extreme weather and climate. They've learned how to do it, guys. Here's back on the theme of Joe Biden and what they were talking about when it came to NBC saying, oh, they're going to turn his family. They're going with family attacks now. That was his strength, right? So here's a headline from Yahoo News. Why is Joe Biden so unpopular, right? And CNN wonders, why isn't Biden more popular? They're wondering right now, which is why isn't he more popular? At this point in his term, Joe Biden is the second most unpopular president in modern U.S. history. I don't know. What could it be? Who knows, right? We got this one here, right? We talked about the other day, steak, like if you just cut it out, you can actually help 30% of global emissions, guys. If you just eat a little bit more tofu and soy instead of a nice steak, you're going to help the world. 30% is what they say, 30, right? And we're getting more and more of that here. This is another one. Save the planet. Put down that hamburger. This is an actual headline. Researchers examined the diets of 55,500 people. What a weird number. 55,500 people, and found that vegans are responsible for 75% less in greenhouse gases than meat eaters. Get on it, guys. You can be 75% more efficient in helping all of this stuff. The Herald Sun asks us in Australia, would you wear a face mask in public permanently? A study has found this would reduce COVID mortality rates. So that's all good news, guys. Right? We got a maximum Moscow time today. So that's pretty good. All right. So the big news on Twitter today is that it's not Twitter anymore. It's X. Right? So everyone talking about this weekend, the X app finally here. Linda, how do I, Yacarino, Yasser? I think it is a straight up Yacarino. I remember I got it wrong last time, and then I finally found out how to pronounce her name, and now I'm confused again. My memory doesn't work in that way. Like I have a good memory, but when it comes to it was this or it was that, and there's like a binary, I have a ton of trouble with like left and right and weird things like that all the time. Anything that I can't put a trick on it to remember, I'm not going to remember it. So it's either, and I apologize for getting it wrong, it's either Yacarino or Yassarino. I forget, so apologies to the Twitter X app CEO. And here's what she says. It's an exceptionally rare thing in life or in business that you get a second chance to make another big impression. Twitter made one massive impression and changed the way we communicate. Now X will go further, transforming the global town square. X is the future state of unlimited interactivity centered in audio, video, messaging, payments, banking, creating a global marketplace for ideas, goods, services, and opportunities. Powered by AI, X will connect us all in ways we're just beginning to imagine. For years, fans and critics alike have pushed Twitter to dream bigger, to innovate faster, and to fill our great potential. X will do that and more. We've already started to see X take shape over the past 8 months through our rapid feature launches, but we're just getting started. So a little bit of a history lesson here. I'll give you, let's do the new features, the history lesson, and then where it's headed. So these are all the features they've launched. They're pretty amazing, actually. So this comes from Zamiri on Twitter. So first, it's the creator payments, right? Pretty interesting stuff. First payments have already been processed. We've all seen these pictures, people getting, pretty nice checks. People are happy. They've changed it a little bit. You no longer need to have a subscription button. 5 million impressions per month aren't what's necessary, and you'll get paid for profile visits soon, which is a pretty big bump, right? The next one, creators will be paid from the moment they requested creator verification. Ad sharing will be available in over 100 countries. Followers, the term followers will be changed, possibly to viewers. Number 3, bookmark changes. The bookmarking feature is underwhelming and is receiving updates. Bookmark straight from timeline, search features for bookmarks, weekly email with saved bookmarks. Highlights tab. This has been implemented, but not many people use it. Twitter's designer has also come out and said she doesn't love it. Very likely we'll see changes soon. Shadow bans. Shadow bans are an issue on Twitter. Elon confirmed Twitter will show shadow bans directly on users' profiles. They will include the active shadow ban, the reason for the ban, and potentially a solution. Videos updates have been made to videos on the platform. They can have 10-hour videos, picture and video watching. So the way you can sort of minimize the screen, they're trying to do that. Live streaming video has high priority and will be implemented soon. We've been using it for a while, right? We've still been using the Periscope thing. We haven't gone anywhere, right? We have not gone anywhere. Live streaming, smart TV app is also in the making. Easy scam reporting, that has been easier. I've been reporting all the fake account BTCs. I had someone reach out to me yesterday even saying, is there a fake account BTC on Twitter? Probably. I see them all the time, just like I see them around for lots of people. Doesn't really take much to get one of these now. So it's a pretty quick approach. Whenever I see someone, I catch them a lot because I'll notice people retweeting my link every day for the show, and sometimes I'll notice that like someone who's already retweeted it again, and then I'll just go check their follower count, and it will be someone with 0 followers, even though I know in real life they've got 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50,000. And so you'll just be able to tell really quickly it's a fake account, especially when I catch people days later. For example, if I went on Robert Breedlove's podcast months ago, and every now and again I get a fake Robert Breedlove because they've got to retweet everything that Breedlove has ever liked or tweeted in order to get consistency there, except for the follower count. So you'll do that and you'll see it, and usually I just report them now. The button has gotten really good. Like, are you doing it for yourself or someone else? Bang, bang, bang. And then it seems to go away. I don't see them anymore. Who knows what's happening to them? But looks like they're gone. So he's going to change the colors and this and that. And here's the interesting parts. The financial institution, if done right, X could become half of the global financial system, is what Elon is saying. The vision is to create the most efficient database for the thing that is money. Goals, least amount of fraud, everything in real time, seamless integration. And they're also going to have a new like animation and blah, 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 blah. But the interesting part is this financial institution, and that's the thing that everyone's been talking about. Elon Musk has often credited WeChat as being the closest thing financially that he can create. So here's what he says. Elon Musk wants to copy and turn Twitter into WeChat. Through WeChat, Chinese officials have gained access to immense amounts of data, turning the app into a de facto surveillance tool for the government. Now, I think it's right for everyone to bring up that point with Elon and WeChat by him saying we like WeChat. And he's definitely been a little too cozy with the Chinese government on his own right? A lot of people think that a lot of what goes on in China, and if the Chinese authorities tell him to do something, he's basically got to do it, right? So people have seen him go to China. They said he's going over there to kiss the ring. When it came to the factories he's got with Tesla, the market share that he's got in China, and all these things. Now, I don't know much about that part, right? What's going on actually in China? What is his relationship with Chinese authorities? I have no idea about that stuff. It doesn't look out of sort to me. It doesn't look exactly like what people are saying as far as, oh, they've got leverage on him. He has to do whatever they say, right? I don't know if it's exactly like that. But it does seem like he's a little more polite to them than he is to the US authorities. So something's up there. I wouldn't go too far in imagining what it is. I don't think it really changes his outlook on life. I think this is someone who's still willing to burn as much money as it takes and burn many bridges as it takes and pick as many fights as it takes. He might just not have the same estimation of China's capacity. And so we'll see. I don't know. Kaneko the Great here talks a little bit about the history of the X app, and I think that's important. So here's what it is. Kaneko the Great. In 1999, Elon Musk co-founded X.com, aiming to revolutionize banking online. A merger with Confinity in 2000 paved the way for PayPal's emergence. Fast forward to 2022, Musk acquired Twitter for $44 billion, driven by his mission to revive freedom of speech on the internet and fulfill X.com's original vision. In 2023, Twitter will merge into X.com, birthing the Everything app, a visionary platform seamlessly blending banking, payments, social media, encrypted messages, voice calls, and video services worldwide. With Twitter's communication prowess and X.com's cutting-edge financial services, users will be able to switch effortlessly between social interactions and financial transactions, transforming how we manage money and connect with others, all on a platform that fiercely champions freedom of speech. In Elon's own words, if done right, X would serve people's financial needs to such a degree that over time it would become maybe half of the global financial system, or by far the biggest financial institution, except not in the way that people are used to thinking about banks. And we're going to talk about that more in a second. The most efficient database for money with the least amount of fraud. Everything is real time. If it involves money, it can be dealt with seamlessly in one location. In addition, you got the social media element, which is also people sharing information of various kinds, whether it's text, video, picture, or voice. There's a lot of potential to make a product that is very compelling that combines all of these things. What are your thoughts on Elon Musk's bold vision for X.com? Well, first of all, my first thought is the following. So from the very beginning with Bitcoin, any worries that I had, just as someone who has a legal background. So as I was looking at it, when I was working with the Senate Banking Committee, I was introduced to the idea of Bitcoin because of the corrupt nature of FATF, the corrupt nature of reporting on money laundering, financial crimes, terrorism funding. Basically, that whole regime out of Paris is completely fake, completely useless, does nothing, and doesn't help anyone. And I learned about it politically and got involved from a political point of view because in the way things work in Canada with federalism, more or less, a Parisian non-elected bureaucracy was telling small-time state banks how they should operate their business and how many loans they can give, more or less. The result was that they're not giving them specific directions, but that's how I got interested. That's how I started following FATF. That's how I started having a war against FATF, more or less, right? How I started to not recognize their authority, not recognize their place in the world, and understand them as being one of the leading institutions that maintains a corrupt financial system way past its due date. So when I first started to look at Bitcoin, the thing I had to make sure of that I understood was what's the ultimate legal protection for Bitcoin? Like, where can we take this in order to confront FATF from a sound footing, from a point that they can't just rug pull the system, they can't rug pull what we're doing. And of course, the US Constitution became one of the most important bulwarks against any attack on Bitcoin, simply because the more and more I looked at Bitcoin, and this was someone who was coming at it from a pure legal point of view, my blind spots 10 years ago for Bitcoin, where I didn't really understand cryptography, very little understanding of computer science. Those things I started to learn, especially the cryptography part. But what I learned through the history of cryptography was really simple, that cryptography, of course, was a form of speech. And we are literally dealing with numbers and the right to tell a secret, or the right to have technology that can preserve your capacity to tell a secret. And of course, being able to tell a secret is somewhat related to freedom of speech, right? You can say what you want in private, even though the private part isn't guaranteed, but the broadcasting part is. So because Bitcoin is a system to broadcast, what it is broadcasting, whether it's encrypted information or not, is not the point. It's that it's broadcasting. And because it's broadcasting, because it is a communications protocol, inevitably, right? Inevitably, Bitcoin is a communications protocol. We are just dealing with information. Now, the information and the orchestration of the technology does something very unique in that it makes unique pieces of digital property, which are based on these cryptographic primitives. And because of that, because the orchestration of the technology is able to isolate something digital and make it uncounterfeitable, uncopyable. That means that the actual property rights that come from Bitcoin flow from its communication rights, from its freedom of speech rights, right? So inevitably, what I said was, and what I argued already back then was that, yeah, because I was having to provide briefing notes to these senators. I said, I don't think you can actually ban it in the United States. I think inevitably Bitcoiners can use the US Constitution and First Amendment guarantees in order to support Bitcoin's preservation. It would be very difficult once a constitutional argument was in place for Bitcoin to dismantle it, or much harder. Now, what I love about this X app is that it's actually making this explicit. It's making what was a difficult lesson for Bitcoiners to have to teach people, what was a boring lesson, really, don't you know money is speech? Kind of esoteric, right? Now, we all love it here, but it doesn't really sound like a very strong pitch to most people. Now, I've been talking about it for a long time, right? If you go back to South by Southwest, you'll see Willy Woo and I talking exactly about this, that no matter what, the United States can use the constitutional protections, and Bitcoin will live in America despite what happens everywhere else in the world. Now, we understand the US system is highly manipulatable, which is what we're going to talk about, going forward here. But you can't just count on constitutional guarantees. But nevertheless, being able to file money as a communications protocol, and being able to file attempts at making money, and when I don't mean making money, I don't mean earning money, I mean literally creating money, that Bitcoin can rely on this. And that's a huge deal. That's a huge deal, because we lived through an era where the combination of money and state were the result of the monopolistic prohibition on the issuance of any other money. What I mean is, before the Federal Reserve, there was all kinds of private issuers of money in America, all kinds. They were everywhere. States issued their own money, companies issued their own money, banks issued their own money. It wasn't just the greenbacks coming out of there was no federal, the greenbacks coming out of the US government. It wasn't that, right? There was all kinds. Now, there were reasons why you wanted to get rid of so many issuers of money. It was a shitcoin casino. It was just complete corruption. Most of these banks issuing money were as corrupt as any one of the ICO coins you see out there. Most of it was a scam, right? And so there was a big trend towards wanting something that protected people against all of these different issuances. Now, I don't know how big the demand was, right? There was certainly as large of a demand in the opposite direction to stop any bank cartel from being formed. And that's why the Federal Reserve chose this weasel word title and weasel word name for itself, federal and reserve. Well, it's neither federal nor reserve any of anything, right? It's propagating fractional reserve lending, and it's not a federal institution. It is a bank cartel. It was always a bank cartel. That's the appropriate name for it, a bank cartel, which was what was going on throughout the industry, right? These were bank cartels. And so there was no concept really of putting the financial rights to issue money as a constitutional fight 100 and something years ago. It wasn't present. So one of the most interesting things that's happening here with the XApp going into financial services is exactly that. It's really plowing the road, and I think seeding in everyone's mind that money is a type of communication, and it does require, if you're going to start to assess the damage of the one money in the world that we've lived with for all this time, you're going to have to think about it in terms of trade-offs. What did we get for having only one money in the world? Everyone who's worried one world currency, mark of the beast, the eschatologists. Eschatology, it's a kind of a douche word. If you don't know what it means the study of the end of the world, right? It's very big in a lot of Christian communities. And they'll always say, oh, the mark of the beast is coming, right? Well, it's already here. It's been here for 100 years. You can't conduct business in the United States if you don't go through the social security system, right? If you don't have a social security number, you can't transact, really. It's very difficult. And the money was heaped on top of that, right? And that's how we had no more competition. There was no more free market in money. It was entirely captured by the bank cartel using the social security number system. And even just as far as a one world currency, guess what? There is no other currency in the world. They're all fake. None of them are real. They're all just relative to the US dollar. Now, they can exist with a different form of paper, with a different issuer, but they're not. They all exist relative to the US dollar. There is no meaning to these other fiat monies unless it is relative to the dollar. They don't gain any meaning relative to gold. They don't gain any meaning relative to some other coin in the world. No one is finding a way to measure the value of the Chinese yuan against the renminbi, against the whatever they call it in India, the whatever their money is. So the point is, all of it is referenced against the US. It can be referenced against each other after, but its relative worth is versus the US dollar first, and then versus everything else after. So for the eschatologists, we have already been in the apocalyptic period for at least 100 years, right? At least 100 years. It's been a mark of the beast as far as you need a number in order to transact, and the money itself has been a one world currency. That's what it's been. It's been a one world currency. And so we've been living in this environment for a long time. And now we're starting to understand what the building blocks of getting out of this situation are. Now, a lot of people can say, oh, Twitter is going to be like WeChat, just as he's saying, right? WeChat is one of the worst examples of the corrupt merger of state and corporate power. I think we can all admit that, right? I think nobody wants a WeChat system in America. As efficient as WeChat is, I used WeChat years ago. I had a phone the last time I was in China, just a burner that I used to get around China. It was unbelievably poisoned in just a little bit of time in China, right? Just a complete garbage phone after. That it was already the time where like news articles were coming through the firewall, but getting instantly weirdly translated. Like if I tried to read a baseball story that summer of 2016, the last time I was there, even that came through with like clear editing and clear manipulation and clear censorship, which already mind-boggled me back then. So I don't use WeChat. I used it for a time over there just to play around with it and all of these things. But what we see from then on is that this merger, and you can see it in China, right, with their CBDC. It sort of works hand in glove with WeChat. I don't know the specifics, but I've heard sort of stories, oh, like my WeChat won't work because I jaywalked or something like that. Right now, a lot of that could be made up as well. I'm not sure exactly what's going on over there, but it does look like WeChat is heavily integrated into the social credit system in China. So if you don't do this, you don't get that. If you do this, you don't get that, and blah, 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 right? So major problem. A lot of people worried about that coming here. Now, this corporate merger between state and corporate, this corrupt merger, I should say, between corporate and state power. This is a great RFK line that he's been using, right? So I like to reiterate it. This corrupt merger can really, I think anyway, looking at what Elon has done, looking at the differences between WeChat, and I think as far as apps go, WeChat is a pretty efficient app. I liked its usability for sure. And from what I hear from friends I have that still use it regularly, they all say it's a great app, really great app, really efficient, gets you where you want to go, and blah, blah, blah. But at what cost? Of course, at what cost, right? Now, I don't think we have any lessons from the consumers in China about what most Bitcoiners are interested in, which is, I think, the separation of money and state, right? But now that we are starting to see money and communications in a very similar light, now that we do understand more and more, it's not just Bitcoiners, right? This was a uniquely Bitcoiner thing to see freedom of speech as a support mechanism, as a legal support mechanism for Bitcoin. That was sort of a niche idea. What's happening here with Elon going with XApp the way he is he's really popularizing this idea that financial systems are a form of speech, and that you can mix a communications protocol rather easily with a financial protocol. And when you hear RFK's recent talks, anyway, about Section 230 and the weaponization of the federal government and the federal government's use of the freedom, let's call it, of private companies to censor people and to limit their freedom of speech. So when you think about the federal government who can't do these things, leaning on private businesses who can, you get to the heart of what RFK is complaining about in his now famous testimony from last week, right? The famous testimony where they tried to censor him and he went on anyway. But here's what he's saying about the CIA and Section 230 and where this is headed, and how I think XApp is going to be able to sort of live within the space that RFK is building and Elon helped build, and how Bitcoin can actually rush into this new space and dominate. So here's what he says. Kaneko the Great. Again, Kaneko the Great, really one of the best Twitter handles out there. It's got to be. I wonder who pays this guy, though. I do have some questions. I have some questions about Kaneko. Never met him. Don't know who he is, right? Big fan. We read about him here all the time. I still have some questions. I don't expect anything evil. Right? I think he's great. I'm wondering. It's just a curiosity thing, right? So here, Kaneko the Great. Robert F. Kennedy discusses the federal government pressuring social media companies to censor Americans, the CIA's role in providing a constant pipeline of new wars to enrich the military-industrial complex, and the Biden-Burisma bribery scandal. So this all comes from an interview he did yesterday with Maria Bartiromo. And if you don't know who Maria Bartiromo is, she's one of the top Fox hosts. I think she's one of the first women to do something about media or something like that from the 90s. some weird historic thing she did. Very beautiful woman. And if you didn't know, I've met her husband, who is a straight Bitcoiner, he's been in Bitcoin for a long time now, which is always interesting to us. So Maria Bartiromo, husband, is a big Wall Street guy, total Bitcoiner, right? So just in case you were wondering. So it was actually two Bitcoiners that were talking on Fox News yesterday, Maria Bartiromo and RFK. So here's what he said. The White House has deployed an army of federal agencies, including the CIA, FBI, DHS, IRS, and many others, to threaten Facebook, Google, and Twitter with withdrawing their Section 230 immunity, which is an existential threat. Those companies cannot exist without that immunity, and they were told that if they did not censor the president's opponents and critics of these policies, they would lose that immunity. With the intelligence agencies, many of them, although not all of them, are now serving the purpose of enriching the military-industrial complex and expanding its power for some military contractors. My objective is to restore the moral authority of the country, our moral standing in the world, and our leadership in the world. And it begins with the American middle class at home, and to recapture our government for the American people, and to take it away from this corrupt merger of state and corporate power. I've avoided criticizing the president because I'm trying to bring people together and end the vitriol that has made politics so poisonous. But I think the issues now coming up are worrying enough that we really need an investigation into what happened. These revelations, where you had Burisma, this notoriously corrupt company that apparently paid out $10 million to Hunter and his dad, if that's true, then it's very troubling and it needs to be investigated. So what he's actually saying here is that the federal government has been threatening these companies to eliminate Section 230 immunity. Section 230 immunity is the thing that allows the media companies, Twitter, Facebook, Google, to not be a publisher of news. So if you're a publisher of news, you are liable for the crazy shit they say on the platform. Now, I believed that when Alex Jones was deplatformed, for example, that if he sued them and it ended up working totally the opposite of what I said because of how corrupted the system is. So when Alex Jones was first arrested, naively, I said, well, Alex Jones, now what he can do is he can just sue these guys if they said he was publishing fake news on his platform, and that's why they kicked him off. And now that they say they can kick him off because it's fake news, well, they're actually suggesting they are publishers and they have the power to edit, and that they are editing, and that they therefore are news. So I said that the kicking off of Alex Jones, naively in my 2018 innocence, right, I thought at the time would instantly trigger a removal of Section 230 and increased liability of these communications companies, which I welcomed. I thought that was, well, if they're going to censor everyone, if they're going to suppress everyone, and if they're going to kick Alex Jones off for having a little fun, right, and being the most entertaining person on the internet by far, right, if they're going to do that, then they're going to have to lose their thing. And I predicted it would happen. I thought there was no way a court was going to not see what happened to Alex Jones as a grave injustice. Because Alex Jones used, if you didn't know this, Alex Jones used the Rachel Maddow defense. Now, if you don't know what the Rachel Maddow defense is, you got to learn. Rachel Maddow got sued for fake news before, the MSNBC host. And what she said was, and Tucker Carlson's used this too, right? They both used it. I'm an entertainer. It's entertainment. You can't hold me liable for lying. I'm an entertainer. I'm a character. I'm Rachel Maddow. You've seen me on such fake news shows as Rachel Maddow. So the thrust there was that if they're going to do this to someone like him, then they are just the New York Times, and Facebook is the New York Times if they're going to kick someone like Alex Jones off. Now, I was 100% wrong. It didn't work out that way. They said Alex Jones owes like $5 trillion or something. What's it, like a trillion? 1.5 trillion or something stupid like that, right? It was unbelievable, right? So they said you owe all this money and it's terrible and da 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 da. So I don't remember what the exact number is, but it's something unreal, right? And so they the Section 230 thing. Now, what RFK is saying here is don't remove Section 230. He's saying they were threatened with the removal of Section 230, and that's what made them so malleable, because they know they can't survive without Section 230 protections, which allows them to just be this Metcalfe's Law thing, right? You guys know what Metcalfe's Law is? It's the way all these companies were valued. Metcalfe's Law actually coined or popularized by another Bitcoiner, George Gilder. And if you guys don't know who George Gilder is, one of the most fascinating people you'll ever meet in the world. George Gilder was probably the most blue-blooded American around these days. He was a economist. He's the one who coined the trickle-down economics idea, right? That was him. He's behind intelligent design, another one of his theories. So here's his blue blood past. His daddy died in World War II, and his granddaddy started Tiffany's Jewelers. And if you know where Tiffany's Jewelers is, there's one right at the famous one is in the Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue. But there's another Tiffany's as well that's probably as famous right across the street and down a little bit in Rockefeller Center. And because the granddaddy had all of these connections on Fifth Avenue, and all of these people kind of knew each other and were friends, and when he died, Nelson Rockefeller adopted, more or less, George Gilder and raised him. So he was raised by Rockefellers. And George Gilder was very, very popular as an academic. Never really had to have a job because he's so rich, but just was sort of welcome everywhere. Now, some people hated him from the start because he helped Reagan all the time, and he was always helping, not fancy people like him. But he ended up developing the model in the 80s and 90s, which gave value to all tech companies, right? He said, well, it's all just Metcalfe's Law, which is that the value of the network is equal to the square of the users. And this ended up being used to value the early internet companies and the internet boom. And everyone said, they don't create revenue. They're not worth anything, right? It was all his models that allowed people to see past the old cash flow models in order to, do a little financial engineering around it. But the point is, George Gilder, who believes a lot of what we believe here, wrote a book about this Alex Jones stuff, and it was called Life After Google. And it was the sort of Google logo upside down, saying they're creating such legal liability for themselves with all of this censorship and with all of this stuff that, and also just a corporate demand or a private sector demand for a better service than what they're offering. So George Gilder probably right about all of this stuff, and that's what it looks like we're seeing. The reason why you see a demand for companies that or services like what Twitter is doing, which is sort of opposite to what Google is doing, listening to the government and following government orders and reiterating that corrupt merger of corporate power and state power. Then you start to see that what Gilder is arguing for, what a Gilder argued for years ago. At the same time, he was making the arguments exactly when I was making the Alex Jones arguments. Him and I used to go for lunch with George Gilder in New York a couple times because he wrote this book and was it was all about blockchain at the time. So interesting guy. So the Section 230 stuff, though, government pushing private industry, I think that, let's say, the momentum behind that, the narrative behind that, the future capacity of this is now greatly diminished. And it's for all the reasons that you think. Like, it's basically because people are going to turn their back on things that aren't working. Just look at the setting here. This is what Turdemeester tweeted this weekend, and you'll start to see why people are going to turn from this without much argument, right? In order to have self-preservation and help their own selves. So here's what Turdemeester says. In 1990, the oldest boomers were 44 years old. Their generation was 42% of all households, and they controlled 21% of the wealth. Today, the oldest millennials are 42 years old. They represent 31% of all households and control a mere 5.5% of wealth. That's 65% less per household. So, not a healthy situation. And then you get situations like Kamala Harris, right? The Kamala Harris, right? This weekend, she was yelling and screaming on the internet about book bannings and everything. And Vivek Ramaswamy had probably one of the greatest jokes ever on Twitter, like ever. And he didn't even put a punchline. So she's up there yelling and screaming about all the things that are wrong in the world and books getting banned and affirmative action ending. And Vivek says, Kamala Harris makes the most powerful case I see in my lifetime against race and gender quotas in government. If only she knew it. Now, you get the following thing too. This is a headline from the Wall Street Journal, right? This is along the lines of what Tur said. Europeans are becoming poorer. Yes, we're all worse off. This is a headline, right? An aging population that values its free time set the stage for economic stagnation. Then came COVID-19 and Russia's war with these folks. Then you get, here's another one from CNN. Pentagon watchdog finds some Western weaponry sent to Ukraine was stolen before being recovered, right? That's just, stolen before being recovered. Now, this is just government failure here, right? Government failure. When you look at the suppression and the censorship, when you look at what's gone on, and most of these institutions, nobody's happy about it, left or right, Democrat or Republican. Most Americans not happy about it. Here's what Stephen Miller has brought up that we can I think we're going to see this stuff materialize in the next few months, but this is what it looks like, right? So this is Stephen Miller. If you don't remember who Stephen Miller is, he worked for the Trump campaign, wrote a lot of speeches was one of the most widely hated people of that era. He was like the fascist in chief, they said, right? But here he is giving some really interesting points, really interesting tactics on what can happen next and where I think things are going in the next few months, and inevitably how Bitcoin is going to come through the middle here. So here's what he's saying. Federal budget alert. Government funding for federal agencies and departments. Example, the Department of Justice, Department of Energy, the Department of Homeland Security. All of this expires on September 30th, right? So this is more of the debt ceiling adjacent arguments. It's not exactly debt ceiling, and he'll explain what goes on here in a second. The 12 annual appropriations bills called omnibus, when they are jammed together, or continuing resolution, CR, when the previous year's budget is automatically continued, refill the budgets of every federal agency. These appropriations bills pay for staff, offices, and all executive action carried out by the federal workforce. If Congress denies the funds for any agency activity then that activity cannot occur. It would be a criminal violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act and a direct violation of the Constitution. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of the appropriations made by law. Unlike autopilot mandatory benefit programs, Medicare, the discretionary budget that funds executive branch agencies is a zero-based budget. It resets to zero each year unless and until Congress provides new funds. That makes 12 appropriations bills the 12 most powerful bills Congress passes. This is what our founding fathers intended. It's what is known as the power of the purse. It's how Congress is meant to keep the other branches, especially the executive, in check. Madison explained that the appropriations power is the most complete and effectual weapon with which any constitution can arm the immediate representatives of the people. Now, you know that the Senate, for example, in America, if you guys weren't aware, this has zero power of the purse. None. Only Congress. Only Congress. The weakest people on the Hill have the power of the purse. So here's what he said happened. Regrettably, the Congress, and conservatives in particular, have long ago made this power dormant by treating the annual discretionary budget as perpetuating on autopilot like mandatory spending, rather than making clear that funds will only be made available for lawful and legitimate activities. The left and establishment, by contrast, have constantly tacked their priorities and those of the bureaucracies into every appropriations bill. But that could all change if conservatives choose a new path. For example, the House could write the DHS appropriations bill to provide border funds exclusively for enforcement and deportation activities, while expressly denying any and all funding for the release, parole, or resettlement of any illegal or inadmissible aliens inside the United States. Dollars for deportations while defunding releases. Now you begin to see the urgency of Congress reclaiming and reasserting the power of the purse. So what will your representatives do? How will they meet this existential moment for our republic? There is no more important legislative exercise that will take place in this Congress. Now, what have Bitcoiners been saying forever? Basically, that the government has run amok because there is no more accountability money. It's all fake. Because there's more fake money and they can just print more fake money, this feedback loop between Congress and the executive branch from the financial point of view is non-existent. That's how you get away with all this shit. That's how you get away with creeping corporate merger and private-public merger. But that's part that was poorly said. That's how you end up getting this corrupt merger of state and corporate power. That's how it happens, right? There is no end to the money that these guys can have. They can hire more bureaucrats, more lawyers, more people to put pressure on these things and on these companies. And that's how you end up getting into this situation. And it ends up destroying the very companies that they're trying to enlist, right? Look at these stories of these companies that I don't think Americans are going to support anymore after all of this stuff, right? This has a lot to do with for years, mainstream media being part of the industrial war machine in America, being used in this way that we were mentioning, this passive media form. This passive media form is an anomaly in history. Like I said at the start, interactive media was media, right? It's only in our weird time that we had passive media do we even have to conjure and invent the term interactive. But just look at these companies that are about to be punished, and even the government side, right? So here's the Disney again, right? Here's Disney again. Remember we told you all these crazy headlines that they wrote about the Sound of Freedom, right? We've read a bunch of them on Moscow Times. Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms. Trump screens Sound of Freedom, seeking to rally evangelicals around the fear of child trafficking. This one's from The Guardian. It's Uncle Tom's Cabin, but for QAnon. Film spreading child trafficking hysteria is making bank. QAnon supporters are promoting Sound of Freedom. Here's why. Rolling Stone, apart from relentless messaging, Sound of Freedom is hobbled by a near total absence of procedural logic. Okay. The Guardian again, Sound of Freedom, the QAnon adjacent thriller seducing America. It goes on and on and on, right? Sound of Freedom is an anti-child trafficking fantasy fit for QAnon. Blah, 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 blah. Well, in other news, this happened on the weekend. Ex-ABC News journalist, so ABC owns Disney, right? That's all the parent company. They're all one thing, ABC. Ex-ABC News journalist James Gordon Meek, previously the Disney-owned network Star Emmy Award-winning porter, pleaded guilty Friday to federal charges of transporting and possessing, what do you think, in a horrific case involving infant, what do you think? So, like, people are going to continue to wonder what the hell is going on. And this freedom of speech issue, right, and censorship that goes along with the lack of freedom of speech, because of things like XApp, are now running directly into money, which is an amazing thing for us, that we can have one coherent conversation in America now about censorship and freedom of speech simultaneous to having a conversation about money. This was not possible a couple of years ago. XApp is only going to increase that. And it's going to increase it in ways that Bitcoiners are already prepared for. You know, look at the viewpoint that Bitcoiners get to have on the world. Look at how far ahead we are of the conversations that other people are just getting introduced to now, right? Look at how far ahead we are. We've been saying this for a long time, that speech is money, right? That we've been saying it for a long time, that money is speech and all this stuff. It's now starting to become popularized. It's going to become a normal idea. Now, look at our own insight. This is The Economist, right? This is The Economist talking about Bukele again, obviously. Do you think they love him? No, right? Here's what they say. President Nayib Bukele is gutting democracy and being applauded for it, right? The article goes on to say the following. Right, this is the subheadline. You're not even going to believe it, right? This is they interview a guy here, right? So this is a Salvadorian, right? He says, "This is no longer the El Salvador I grew up in." All right, this is in The Economist. Here's his quote, right? "Democracy is under threat in Nayib Bukele's El Salvador. My business associate, entusiasta del crimen violento, Selvia del Diablo, protest." So that's his name. My business associate, he's got this long title, protested the new dictatorship and is now in jail. Here's the actual translation of his title, of his name, right? "My rights are under threat in El Salvador as Bukele guts democracy. Juan Pablo," his name, Vilo, anyway, blah, 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 AKA the angel of murder. Oh no, angel of death. Sorry, El Ángel de la Muerte. Yeah, that's the quote they got in The Economist. That the angel of death of El Salvador, who protested, is upset because his rights are being violated. He is a criminal murderer. And The Economist is publishing it. Now, I don't know what crimes exactly he committed, but doesn't sound like a nice guy, right? Doesn't exactly sound like a nice guy. And you know, along those lines, you had this story just on Friday, right? Published so no one would see. In the same vein, right? What's happening in El Salvador, what's happening with freedom of speech, with censorship, but what about the money? All right, well, this is from our favorite folks over at some fucking bank. I don't know which one. Probably Apollo Global Management. All right, so this is some rich guy. Investor Leon Black settles with U.S. Virgin Islands over Epstein probe. Apollo Global Management Inc. co-founder Leon Black paid $62.5 million to the U.S. Virgin Islands to avoid any legal claims tied to a Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking investigation, the New York Times reported on Friday. So, it was a stress. So $62.5 million, you know, leave me alone a little bit. Just leave me alone, right? That's what we're dealing with here, guys. That's what we're dealing with here, guys. There we go. So let's go back through some of these quotes, see what we got. So when you get banned, you lose all your finances. Yeah. All right, almost back. Climate lockdowns are coming. Could be. I will ignore them. I will just ignore them. I ignored the pandemic one, so I'll ignore those ones too. They don't apply to me. That's what I say. They're for followers, not for me. Not for me. Like, I'm not doing that. You eat steak instead of bugs. You lift weights and you let the sun hit your skin. Racist. Big time racist. Get your booster and eat your bugs, Brian, with the big time 2024 advice. Big time 2020. Oh, did you guys read the oh my God. I think Peter Hotez is losing his mind. Did you guys see the quote that he made, Peter Hotez? Let me read you his quote. Very strong. Very, very strong quote. I think he's got some mental issues. I think he's got some. I don't know if I have them. Let me see. Anyway, I don't have them. Basically, he's just, get your boosters and go see Barbie. I only wore a mask once during COVID, and it was because a local supermarket wouldn't let me in. So I literally pulled my shirt over and I had to let me in. Yeah, I mean, I had a mask. I wore it more than that. I had all kinds of techniques to get in without a mask and everything, though. My kids never wore a mask, so I'm proud about that. Instead of breathing with your own lungs, take the of the climate. X marks the spot. Yeah. But look, again, I think there's a world in which we do have a lot of coins, right? Bitcoin is just in the same way that the US dollar is the only one that has any real meaning and everything else drives meaning out of the US dollar. I think it's the same. There will be other things for coffee coin, and companies are going to release their own money again. That's all going to be back here. But wealth will be measured in Bitcoin. That's the psychological space that Bitcoin can be. It's the reference for money. It's the reference rate of money. It's the money, but also the reference rate. It's how you understand the money. So whatever US dollar becomes as far as food stamps go, that'll help you figure it out. That's why RFK is talking about backing the US dollar with Bitcoin. Win some. Yeah, it's no good, huh? Yeah, it's got a lot of problems. The video on Twitter is still nowhere near where you'd want to make it. Marvin, making a quantum computing useful to the Bitcoin system. Well, we look forward to it, my man. I deleted Twitter. X, yeah, I love Noster, but I like the fighting on Twitter. There's not enough fighting on Noster for me. I like to see the people getting angry. Good day, Bitcoiners, indeed, Ben. Software and algorithms are also a form of speech. Bitcoin is yeah, absolutely, veterans. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, we all know this. We all know this. What XApp is doing is making it explicit. If a literally communications protocol morphs into a financial protocol before everyone's eyes, it saves us a lot of time explaining that Bitcoin is also a communications protocol. So that's why I'm saying it's such a good thing. New Hampshire. Indeed, Ohio. Why don't you guys sponsor Bitcoiner gamers? We should. You're right. B for bacon. I'm on, and you're coming at us from Twitch, so I'm trying to do some reach out. I think we will. I think there's enough Bitcoin type gambling games anyway that we could definitely make something interesting. Embrace your inner alien. That's the treasure within, guys. That's the treasure within. Bitcoin is down. Yeah, we'll live. WTF happened in 1971. We also got to ask WTF happened in 1964, right? This is a good one. I loved your article, Graffiti. I read it this weekend. Oops. Yes, you got to represent yourself as a jester. This is the right mask to go under the radar and deliver the punches. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And coming back with Metcalfe's law, the square of users is about the number of edgers in the network. Yeah, but it was used for valuation. That it was used by VCs in order to explain, what could happen. So there you go. Oh, look at this. This is a George Gilder convert. I bought my first Bitcoin after reading Life After Google. That was George Gilder's book. And heavily tied to what we're talking about, right? His whole point was that Google was turning itself into a publisher, and that the Alex Jones case in particular was going to be failed to them. I agreed with him. But the problem with our idea is that it imagined the courts working normally and not giving a $2 trillion fine to that. When that came out, like, it was so great that not only was the judgment opposite of what I thought, they threw in the $1 trillion fine. It just made it as clown showy as you can imagine. Whatever happened to Q? Well, Q was always controlled poisoning of the well, right? You take a real story and you camouflage it with just a little bit of fake news. And so the actual Q movement, the coherence of it was an op, unfortunately. I tried to warn many people in the early days about this, and there you go. There you go. David, glad you're back, David. We appreciate you. Benjamin Netanyahu's reformation of Israel's court system, which doesn't have a constitution, cements his dictatorship too. Trump announced his intentions to gut the Constitution as well. Well, I don't know if you can gut the U.S. Constitution. It's not that simple. And indeed, I spent a little bit of time in the Israeli Supreme Court. I visited as part of a trip to Israel a long time ago for young leaders of Canada. And weirdly, because of the dual nature of Canada, the English and the French thing, the way our Constitution was made, they actually use the Canadian Constitution regularly as a guide for how to limit people's rights, by the way. It's not like a good thing, right? But we were invited to hear a case about some land expropriation from a Palestinian, and the judge had been instructed a lot of crossover, like a lot of Israelis go to law school in Canada and the United States. So this judge had gone to school in Canada, I guess, and wanted to chat with us after, and so we heard the case and blah blah blah. It was all based on Canadian law. Who cares? So the point though is that we are not suggesting as Bitcoiners that these people, Trump or Netanyahu or their systems, are salvation. Even if they try to fuck with the Constitution, it's not what we need in order to bring a Bitcoin standard in and change the world and separate money and state. More clown show is just as good, right? Like when I say we can protect the Bitcoin system with the U.S. Constitution, I'm not exactly saying that, because I just said to you that Alex Jones should have been protected in the same way that Bitcoin should be protected, and absolutely wasn't. He owes $1 trillion fucking dollars, right? I mean, that complete injustice, like not even close. So I'm not saying that what is needed here are these folks to deliver something to us that is just, right? Even if they come out and continue to make these mistakes and do stupid shit, then it's just as good, right? It's just as good. Zaps on X, doubtful. Yeah. Did you see? I hope everyone noticed as well. You know the ice cream. You know that thing that's going viral. Yeah, like it. Yeah, you know all these things. The whatever that girl is. And now another one went viral, and it was two girls. But people don't realize it was Bitcoiners just taking a piss, right? Because they're getting zapped lightning, right? And they're going, the girl is just going, getting zapped lightning. Again, watching Bitcoin as a communications protocol is always beautiful. And watching it with some memes and some jokes inside of it, those two girls, most people don't even know it's a joke. Those two girls, they think they're the same as the girl. Not. They were getting sats. Hilarious. Would you do this on stage for some sats? Of course you would. Yeah, the B-man, he's sad because he misses it. Yeah, he's missing the burner and the poverty. Well, it screwed him over. He's like, I had a business model. Yeah, the hotels is why I mentioned the booster just broken brain. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the WorldCoin. Yeah, and I brought that up a long time ago, right? The Altman, that the guy leading the world in AI development was Altman. That was one of my simulation winks from a while ago. Yeah, like WorldCoin, it's going to be the same thing. Like you got to have experiments here. Let them have their stupid orb. Not going to work. Um, I did know about the internet shutdown in France. I don't think it's true. It is true. Yeah, it's true. I don't know how it was exercised. They voted to do it, and I think it was just done in terms of like limiting a few people here and there and limiting some DMs around sites, but no less harmful to their prospects going forward. In the same way that this kind of censorship, like again, Vivek's answer, man, Vivek is just top notch, right? His answer to the question about January 6th is so spot on, right? It was the censorship that caused it. It's all Americans' fault, and it's the censorship. So if they keep doing this stuff in France, well, they can expect more rioting, right? So, all right, Tommy, missed it. Yeah, This one's for you, Tommy. There's a lot of good stuff in there. You're gonna like it. All right, team. I gotta go. I got a busy day. I hope you're doing great. I'll see you all tomorrow. And we chat about X. We love X. Let X teach the world that communications and financial transactions are the same thing. All right, everyone. Peace.